blessed love and peace. Still in it. Additional reminders of things to share. One is that I'm supposed to share a Mélanger anthem, which is the basic set of principles for our devoteds and our orthodoxy. And it's the short of it is this: Ahimsa Ubuntu Veritas Haya Shuma Kahiga Samari Shema Shabono Narab Nisamafo Academia Sadauji Gambaro Forgiveness. 16 principles from 16 different languages of 16 different cultures. The street translation of each of these, and this is all we're sharing at the moment, is this: Ahimsa, don't starve none, won't be none. Ubuntu, don't starve none, won't be none. Veritas, don't story none, won't be none. Haya, don't STD none, won't be none. Shu, game recognized game. Maka, green is the land. Higa, blood, cause. Samadhi, CPT. Shema, hallelujah, amen. Shabono, brother's going to work it out. Narab, respect. Nisamafo, roots. Academia, knowledge of self. Sadauji, the struggle. Kambaru, keep your head up. Forgiveness, it's all good. There's another translation that also provides a reference to where the words come from. So I'll give that rendering of it like this. Ahimsa, don't start none, will be none. Sanskrit. Ubuntu, don't starve none, won't be none. Zulu. Veritas, don't story none, won't be none. Greco-Roman. Haya, don't STD none, won't be none. Arabia. Shu, game recognized game. China. Maka, green is the land. Lakota. Higa, blood, cause Scandinavia. Samadhi, CPT, Pali. Shema, hallelujah, amen, Israel. Shabono, brother's gonna work it out, Yanomami. Narap, respect, Wurundjeri. Nisamanfo, roots, Twi. Academia, knowledge of self, Gweka-Wejut. Sadauji, the struggle, Iberia. Kambaru, keep your head up, Japan. Forgiveness is all good, Anglo-Saxon. So there is that. Also, one of the other announcements to share is that we are guided at this moment to concentrate and even exclusivize, meaning to only participate in interactions and endeavors. Well, actually, before I say that, say this. Particularly within our Mélanger experience, amidst the orthodoxy and the devoted, there's a basic requirement. It's a vow, threefold. Renouncing all citizenships of any nations of the world. Renouncing an ownership of property, bank accounts, savings, investments, land titles. Renouncing, letting all that go. And practicing the Panchasilas: peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety. Peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety. Those three elements is the vow of our Mélanger orthodoxy and devoted. And at this point, we are guided to only maintain ongoing relations and endeavors, cooperatives, projects with kinfolk and groups who also practice those three things, that vow. Otherwise, other types of interactions simply being transactional interactions, meaning like going to the market and say, "Yo, let's exchange," and there's it. Less of that one-time kind of transactional relations, transactional interactions, meaning again, like one-time exchanges. It might happen periodically, it might happen regularly, but not making contracts, not making agreements, not making promises, not trusting um, for those things to continue on with a regularity, not committing ourselves to those type of things. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. Transactional. Why? Because in those three things, no citizenship, no ownership, and the ethics, extreme vulnerability, extreme targeting of gaming grifts, of all different types of gaslight and misdirections, intentional and unintentional. Kinfolk who mean well, who try to like connect, but at the same time are still citizens and thus influenced and biased and negative influences. So because of that, because of the experience of the small and big betrayals through the years to this day, it's a matter of us being disciplined and not availing ourselves to that type of adversity. And it's difficult because with this empathy, there's a sense of ownness of responding and being available and additionally. But again, not just for our own protection, not for just for our own sake, but for the sake of the service that we provide, for the sake of the well-being of the world. There is a necessity of us instilling certain protections away from the predatoriness of civilization. And so that's what the vows are, non-predatoriness, and in concentrating our relations and our interactions with those who also practice that non-predatoriness, that is provides further sanctity for ourselves. There's challenges as well, but that's what it is. And then anything else, just in dealing with the pragmatics of life amidst civilization and convention, keeping it to a transactional thing and not pretending to have solidarity and not availing ourselves to trusting others only to be betrayed and otherwise. Because like I say, we don't have to get back that others have, not in an earthly sense. One of the best things we have, aside from diplomacy and proactiveness and support for kinfolk, is distance. So this is part of that. And recognizing, particularly in the United States at this time of year, at the 4-year cycle, things become increasingly contentious. Things get increasingly stressful. Kinfolk got all types of game being run, and are setting up people for being sold out. So, and again, we, in a spiritual path, we have an onus of making ourselves available to others, but at the same time, we also have an onus for honesty, and we have an onus for our own well-being and the well-being of all, and recognizing that our service is ultimately for that purpose. So there is an onus of protecting ourselves in an appropriate way. So anyways, that's the reaction, or the transactional relations type situation at the moment, aside from working with people who are on those 3 joints: no citizenship, no ownership, and the 5 ethics of Pontesilis, the Buddha. So that's the joint. And then we got story time now. I think if there's anything else. And also, we don't have all the time in the world either, believe it or not. Alright, we got story time. So we got about an hour, I think, before we get into the storage zone of concern. The zone of concern for the storage. Alright. Now this is like another topic. This is like changing the mood. There was a point that was very congruent with what I just described. Now we're getting to the fatigue factor now as well. Now I'm observing just now, getting into the fatigue factor. All right. Oh, and I didn't say something about the previous joint about putting some spec on it and keeping the name out the mouth. The other thing also is that for those them bullies that already done said things, that said things repeatedly, again, black, white, across the board, white folk who done spoke with disrespect towards mixed people as a whole, categorically, emphatically. Whenever having the interest and the inclination of amends. Ain't nobody's slave, ain't nobody's, you gotta do what we say, whatever that's or the other. What we do think about is some type of Jerry Maguire moment. And not the belittling, dehumanizing, degrading scenario, but at the same time, something along the lines of that type of affirmation. What am I talking about? I love mixed people. Something like that. Because the half-ass, yeah, whatever, kind of apologetic, dismissive, yeah, okay, no, you know better, we know better. Ain't no fooling nobody. Paying attention. Something that measures up to the same type of emphasis about the hatred. And again, not fakery either. If it's not felt, then don't say it. Amends without like awakening? Nah. This ain't America. That fakeness. Feeling guilty and just having to say something just to get back on track or whatever. This ain't what that is. Say that. When there is the interest of amends, don't even have to say I love mixed people like that at all. But you know, when there's that interest for amends, genuinely, there's a genuine path of amends. Because there's been a genuine path of arrears. And again, that's for all them bullies them. Now we go to story time. So the first joint I was talking about, oh wait, did I say the first joint? I gave the anthem. I gave the relations. Okay, I gave the additional, oh, I didn't say blessing yet. All right. I gave the additional side note of addendum for the previous joint. So all right, now we're going back to the relation situation. I'm going to talk about how we trust people, because again, I mean, on that notion of, as I was talking about before, of like no citizenship, no ownership, and the Panchaseelas. Just to understand, like when we interact for years with beautiful kinfolk, loving kinfolk, most of our kinfolk of the world, there's so many kinfolk who have beautiful beliefs, beautiful practices, beautiful intelligence and knowledge, beautiful intentions, dreams, aspirations, work, diligence, painstaking toil and striving and trotting. We see that, we respect it. At the same time, many of the same kinfolk are still participants, and not just participants, but pledging allegiance through citizenship to the atrocities. And don't want to look at it, don't want to acknowledge it. It's natural, we understand that. But at the same time, there's only so much we can do to just like pretend or to look the other way or otherwise. And that threshold has been reached. So don't have that availability like we do through the years. That's just the plain and simple of it. And it's that's where things get to at this point. Because there's ain't no further like plausible deniability and avoidance. Like, ain't got no clothes on. Put some clothes on. black and white and otherwise. It doesn't matter what kind of citizen. It doesn't matter U.S. or otherwise. To be honest, the World Republic. Anyway, all right. So, anyways, it's challenging because we try painstakingly so often through the years to find a way of cooperating with others, doing co-ops and projects, studies, and additionally. But what we find, I mean, aside from just like the difficulties of doing something that we're doing, and even like us organizing it in an effective way and otherwise, there's just a natural challenge of just the follow through and the continuity and the continuing perceived and felt relevance and otherwise. So we all that is one thing, but beyond those factors, what we recognize is that at the end of the day, what it is that for the most part, kinfolk still got their full time joint, and all these aspirations, all these hopes and dreams, and all this kumbaya type stuff is the part time joint. And as much as kinfolk may be involved and invested within the part time joint, it's still the part time joint, and it takes a second seat to the full time joint. And some people might be able to ride that for a long time. Some people are retired and have stacked up their full time joint so they can do what they want and devote themselves in retirement to the part time joint. And that could be misleading because it tends to be a different demographic of the population, which is very beneficial and valuable, but at the same time, it gives an air of other people doing a seemingly full time commitment, but it's not a full time commitment. It is a retirement commitment. So, meanwhile, the other people youth, adults, family members, householders who are doing the part time commitment, this ain't a side chick thing. So, um, that's what we recognize, because even when we try to cater or acclimate projects and initiatives as a part-time thing for other kinfolk, even then it just takes things off course. And kinfolk, we recognize that kinfolk are just on a different mindset and are committed to different things. um, and it's life, but that's what we recognize. And so um, because of that, it's again the I'm going off on this and haven't even get to the story time, but it's the trust, and it's the vulnerability, availing oneself, availing a group self to trusting others, depending upon others increasingly and additionally, and then building, but then eventually things falling through or whatever else. And this is not a matter of blaming or otherwise. It's a matter of understanding and experiencing this enough to the point of recognizing like it's implausible to continue to go through that type of scenario, regardless of like who it is at this point, without that type of commitment. No citizenship, no ownership, and the Panchaseelas. Um, and like no in between at this point. If people want to like support or whatever, transactional. I mean we can do a transaction. We can barter and exchange and otherwise. But in terms of like doing a study program, um, doing a co-op, doing any type of regular thing where it depends upon where it involves like agreements with each other of being someplace or doing something at some point. Um, no citizenship, no ownership, Panchaseelas. Other than that, transactional. You have something to exchange, you want to barter something, we can work on that. You want to support the cause and feel the benefits of doing that through an exchange, we can negotiate that on a transactional basis. But that's where things are at this moment. And that's actually very logical. It's actually an established ancient practice. When you look at the teachers of old, what the teachers require, many teachers require for a student to sit and with the teacher and learn. Are we teachers? Am I a teacher? Can't you tell? So is bringing something, making a vow, showing the sincerity, showing the commitment to study, and not in a dilettante Oh yeah, it sounds interesting. Popcorn kind of way of being entertained and amused in a yo, this is life forming. Let me sit and like absorb, bring the fire, bring the food and the offering. That's where we are at this point. And not just giving these joints, even these joints, free. We have a responsibility and obligation to share. And at this point, the obligation is to share in a prudent way with those who show a commitment. No citizenship, no ownership, Panchasilas, or transactional. Our rates are expensive. Again, remember, land, kuduhusan, kudahounds. And I'm speaking English again. Yo, this evening is a very expensive evening, 1 a.m. at this point. Still have to get to story time, so we get to story time. On that topic of relation, trust, understanding, depending, cooperation, story time. And this story time is actually shared with the intention. Their personal motives, but there's also predominantly the interest of like figuring out what's going on with this joint, particularly because of recent experience. Ain't gonna get into all of it. However, here's what we're gonna get to by the grace of the Most High. All right. So I'm gonna explain this story in a twofold way, kind of like an overlap way. So here's how it goes, God willing. A number of years ago, I had the occasion of meeting a beautiful young sister. And when I meet her, I'm in a location that I regularly frequent or post up. And on the occasion, on the day that I meet her, she walks up and kind of like just looks directly at myself and is like surprised and just like eyes wide. And then she continues on to sit and talk with me for like the next 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. We talk about life and all these different types of experiences. Now she's young. She's a high school student, graduating, looking at university, thinking about life. She's mixed. I don't want to give too much information, but so we're talking about that. Now, in that mode, I'm chaste. I am chaste. I am practicing chastity, strong, discipline. I'm a man, still working to be married. Her qualities are applicable to what is considered appropriate for me marrying. However, at the same time, she is young. And I'm working to be disciplined, to not even suggest that type of thing. Off rip. And to cater and respond to what she is soliciting and share what I can. Getting on the scratchy nose now. So, we talk for a while. Like I said, 2-3 hours. The sun started to drip, drop. And like I'm starting to feel guilty about keeping her out towards that hour. So we talk about, okay, yeah, it's probably beneficial for us to wrap up the conversation, and God willing, we'll talk again. And she communicates definitely something to that effect. And then after she continues on her way, I continue on my way. And since that point, like, okay, now then there are thoughts that emerge in terms of like, that's interesting, that's beautiful, but da 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 da, uncertainties, and again trying to figure out what the appropriate approach, intentionality, um, because just as much as it is a matter of her looking for guidance and support, even perhaps from a masculine authority figure, she's also looking for a relationship. That's presumptuous, but at the same time, that's life. And we can talk about marriage and children, and additionally. And so, just as much as there's a responsibility of myself responding to those needs of her looking for somebody who's mixed heritage and provides some wisdom and life guidance, and additionally, it's also a matter of like, yo, relationship, marriage, family. So, anyways, that can be perceived as ego, that could be perceived as fortuitous, but at the same time, she also approaches myself. So it's not as presumptuous as it may seem, perhaps. Some time passes, maybe a couple weeks or whatever, and I see her again. She approaches again and making good on her intentions of like communicating again. Same spot. We continue the conversation, and at that point, it's kind of like a perhaps somewhat pro forma. I had not made conclusions to myself in terms of what my intentions are, and that's what I'm learning still further, is of the necessity for me to discern what I am intending and ready for and prepared to offer and share, rather than trying to cater and be responsive. Takes some doing. So, anyways, that's what happens. And then after seeing her that day, happy to see her since then. Um, and again, with the ideas that occur afterwards, and it takes some time for me to process things, particularly with that type of depth. Um, I'm not a quick mover in that kind of respect in terms of like chatting up a woman, because I'm in a different mode at that point. I'm in like on mode in terms of being teacher and in the public kind of thing. So for me to think in a relationship kind of situation, I'm not in that mode. And this is not a after the fact testimony. It's a processing, because there's further elements to this. Um, so anyways, in getting into that scenario of like, okay, didn't ask her for a number. I actually know where she stays, at least at that time, um, just because that's our conversation. Didn't ask, but it just happened. It just happened to occur from our conversation. Um, and additionally, anyways, point being that I looked her up online to find out if I could see like on her social or whatever, and I found her at one of her accounts, and I sent her a message. She responds, and additionally, but eventually it's like, yeah. Once it gets into the cyber realm, in my experience, it's uncomfortable, and it's like, the vibe is not the same, and then it becomes awkward. So that's where it sits to this day, from like a number of years ago. Um, she continues. By that time, she was already at university, like a few months later, or whatever. Um, and yeah, the moment, it's then. But the learning continues, and that's a purpose, particularly for this moment. And at the same time, relationship is eternal too. So the nature of it can vary and adjust. However, processing, learning, there's that. Now, again, like I said before, just a minute ago, what I recognize, and again, this is very difficult. A man being a man, it's not a matter of asking a woman questions. What does she want? Da, 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 da. That's a scenario in a republic, a secular, emasculated society of femininity, feminism, women's empowerment, and additionally, where men are conditioned, or boys are conditioned with girls as classmates and perceived as friends. There's no friendship between a man and a woman. Why? Because a friend and a friend do not have the capacity to procreate. When there is that propensity to procreate between a man and a woman, between a young sister and a young brethren, that has an energy, that has a force, that has a magnetism that supersedes friendship, plain and simple, and it always factors into the relationship. We can feign, we can try, and otherwise, it's fooling. So, um, point though is this: many brethren, young brethren, are conditioned to perceive women as platonic because we compete and we interact with girls in the classroom, and it becomes a normalized thing. Um, and so there's an emotional dependency upon women to be that friend and that support, when in actuality that's a man becoming subjecting, into to the masculine tendencies of a woman, and putting responsibilities on her that are imbalanced. So, um, a man being a man in a masculine way, with masculine authority, it's other than a matter of asking her all the time what she wants, this and the other. Yes, catering to her and attending to what she wants, what she needs. But it's not her being his mother and telling him everything. He has to be he has to know enough about her to make decisions that are aligned with what she is, full stop, to what she is, what she's committed to, what her interests are, who she is, without her telling him everything. So even when he meets her for the first time, it's a matter of like, okay, let's get married. She says yes or no. Need some time, need to have some conversation beforehand. Know that and have that conversation beforehand. I'm saying this, I sound strong. I'm talking to myself as I say this. It's easier to be that candid in the concept rather than in the conditions. Yet, it begins someplace. And that's what I recognize for myself, because there are numerous occasions when I experience that. And I'm not trying to, that's no cap. I'm just saying, there are numerous occasions when I'm approached by young, very attractive sistren. It's painful, because I know what vibes are, and I experience what vibes are. And so many occasions I suppress what vibes are because I'm not trying to hurt. But at the same time, in not trying to hurt, I'm hurting because the vibes are like, yo, let's make this happen. So I'm still working to figure out the appropriate how. And in that particular scenario, wow. I mean, I've shared the basic gist of it. I said I was telling it twofold, so I've yet to share the second fold. And this is like where it gets a little bit trippy. And if what I've said already, it might be borderline kind of normal, and maybe a little bit awkward. But what the next part I have to say is like, it's like all different types of like, what the f. So, but at the same time, knowing that this is how many people in the world are and live. But before I get to that, in terms of dealing with those conditions of like being in that moment and how to direct conversation, how to share the conversation, how to introduce into the conversation, that prospect of relationship in a way that's healthy and committed, but at the same time, because it's healthy and committed, is very different from what is normal. And how to share it in a brief window where there's a comparative absence of regular interaction, routine interaction, such that there's proper comfort and assurances accordingly. Maybe I'll share another story, maybe after this, that might help balance that awkwardness. I live a life that's very surreal, and within the surrealness of this life, there are many interactions, there are many conversations, verbal and nonverbal, that are very surreal. And the the ordinary person, the normal person, would just call it crazy, call it ego, call it presumptuous, call it heightened imagination and delusions of grandeur, whatever else. It's for the better and it's for the worse. It goes in the different directions, um, and it's communicating on a wavelength that most people are uncomfortable communicating. So, all right. That being said, have I done enough to pretext the second um, the second the second joint of this? All right. So I'll go again just to say again the being decisive, haha, um, and when having a thought like, oh, this woman looks like a marriage prospect. Oh, there's a brief window. How do we introduce this conversation without having to like require a definitive answer? Um, and further. Now that's not like an irregular type of scenarios, but then much less or even much further in the context of a high school senior, perhaps under 18, introducing that conversation and dealing with all the societal ramifications accordingly. Is it proper? Yes, when it's proper. Is it legal? That actually depends. First of all, law. What law are you talking about? And then otherwise, um, honorable is honorable, whatever the law is. So it becomes a question of the law itself at that point. When the law prohibits the honorable, but it all factors in. So um, this happens on numerous occasions through the years, and in the I do this process of evaluation. Like, okay, this is what I'll prepare for. This is what I'll like. If it happens again, or whenever it happens again, I'll try to do this, or I'll do this, and feeling further confident. But then it happens again, either in the exact same way or in a nuanced way, and there's another element or something else. But anyways, going back to this joint specifically, is that it? Is that it? Being definitive, direct, but at the same time in a way that's comfortable, and particularly in a way that doesn't require an immediate answer, an immediate commitment at that moment necessarily, even when the window seems brief. And I guess that's my takeaway at this point for sharing this is to be direct, but at the same time to abstain from demanding a commitment at that moment. And if there's an interest in further conversation, to facilitate arrangement. For myself, texting, emails, all that type of indirect interaction, communication, I already know from my experience that that's not happening. Um, it's a matter of in-person direct communication. So that's what we emphasize, and that's what we got into. So, anyways, that being said, here's the second part of the story. And then there's like the third part. Oh, they didn't mention that before. Here we go. God willing. So, a retelling of this story is this. I didn't share all the components to it. The retelling of this story is this. On that day that I meet the sistren, it just so happens that at that moment, I'm actually talking to a young brethren who's about the same age. And I'm talking to the young brethren. He himself stops of his own volition and sits with me. We talk, and he and I talk for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, a decent time. And like I said, I talk with kinfolk, and we talk about life, like kinfolk. I'm very personal, and I talk about myself. And other kinfolk, by the grace of the Most High, have a comfort very often of sharing information, details, TMI with me. Perhaps I'm seen as a safe person, and additionally, but a lot of times your kinfolk need to like talk some things out and process some things. So I appreciate that trust, and I do my best to respect that, and to respond and share what I can to help in finding solution and well-being and healing. So at that moment, he and I are talking. Like I said, talked for half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It was a while. It was also a while ago. Um, so anyway, we were talking, and part of what he was talking about is that, like, he was asking me some questions. We're talking about spirituality. He was talking about how he was in a relationship with a young sister at that moment, and that he's breaking up with her. And if I recall correctly, it was something about uh, her being unfaithful to him, and like betraying him, and him having to like end the relationship because of that, and that he's actually on his way to meet with his ex-girlfriend, just to have that kind of concluding conversation. The decision's already been made, it's already communicated, so it's just he's on his way at that moment to meet with her, to have that like final kind of like, okay, well, we go our own ways, get everything out on the table kind of situation at that moment when he sees me, right? So we talk about relationship, this and the other, as much as I can share from my experience of what I've studied and learned. And it is at that moment that the sister arrives. And when she arrives and she's looking, like her eyes are open in surprise, she's looking at me, but at the same time, if I'm going to recall it accurately, I have to like recognize she might have also particularly been looking at the young brethren, like she actually knows the young brethren. And so she doesn't say anything. She just kind of stands there and looks at us, and he doesn't say anything. I don't know if they know each other. I don't know if they don't know. I don't. And I'm in that situation a lot when I'm having a conversation with some kinfolk, and additional kinfolk come up and say, "Hey, what y'all talking about?" Just so happens we were in the middle of some personal business, but at the same time, like this is a community thing, so introduce it in a proper way, and see where the comfort levels are. So when she's standing there and looking, I take on that role of presuming to like introduce her into the conversation, and I say, "Hey, what's going on? What's happening here?" Da 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 da. And she kind of smiles, and then the young brethren isn't saying anything, and less responsibility to, obligation to. So I kind of like address the young sister and communicate like what's happening at that scene, like what we're doing sitting there, and and then so she says, "Ah, that's interesting." And so as like I'm explaining that to her, the young brethren says that it's time for him to continue on his way, and he thanks me for the conversation, and it helps a lot, this, that, and the other. And so, okay, beautiful. And that's when the sister sits down, and that's when she and I start talking again for like 2-3 hours thereabouts, a long time, till the sun goes down, till the cows come home. So, anyways, now, like I said, that was the situation, that was the context, and I have less availability of processing what's happening at that moment. I'm doing my best to be like cordial and be hospitable in terms of like ensuring people are comfortable, and additionally without like figuring out all the different angles and everything else like that. And then once she and I have that conversation, that's where my attention is at that point, because we talk for a longer time, uh, further information, and we talk about our personal experiences. She talks about recent experiences, and she's very energetic, and very engaged in our conversation. And so I'm doing my best to be attentive to that and be relevant and share what I can at that moment. And this is the thing I was thinking about as well, while I was trying to think about to share before getting into this part of the story. What I've learned um, is that in talking with young sister, and it's different between young sister and elder sister. And by elder, I'm talking about even just like 18, 19 years old, initially, because by that point, older sister are further seasoned in terms of life experience, so further somewhat calculated, and it's not that's not shade, and that's not meant as a bad or positive or whatever, but that's just actuality. Once a woman has further life experience, like she's further learned and seasoned into the game. So her motives, and additionally, she has a different nature than when she's younger. Same thing, probably with brethren as well, but I'm just speaking about the sister at the moment. And I'm saying that particularly because of this. When a sister is younger, when she's less experienced, when she's less seasoned, when she has less ambitions and like gain knowledge, What I learn as a man, and some learn this at a very young age. I'm a late bloomer. Um, and then even then, it's understanding again the difference between young sister in their late teens and 20s and young sister when they're young teenagers. Before we can talk about virgins and sister who have yet to like know men in that kind of intimate way. What is recognized very often, again, there's all different types of personalities, but what is recognized is that young sistren who have less knowledge about the world and less knowledge about men, and additionally, but at the same time are of age and have an interest in a particular man or otherwise. What is recognized is that experience shares. The sistren tend to be further quiet, like I said before, not giving orders, not saying demands, not saying wants. Quiet, waiting to be told something, and that's not a matter of being submissive or otherwise. It's the nature, and it's a matter of being told, but it's also a matter of like waiting and seeing. Does he know how to talk to me? Does he know what I'm about, what I need, this, that, and the other, without me saying anything? Is he qualified? Type of situation. So, like I said, it's not just a submissive thing, and it's a multifaceted thing beyond man's capacity to understand fully beauty and hallelujah. So that's what we learn better about. So again, it's for the man to be assertive. Have a seat. Let's talk. You're welcome. Would you like something? And then when she stays and she talks and she engages, what experience shares is that she is giving herself. In these situations, I do my best to offer myself as a teacher. That's what I have to share at that moment. And that's what she, and I'm saying in the different scenarios that this happens by and large. And that's what she shares and that's what she accepts. What I recognize when I have an interest in relationship, marriage, and otherwise, what is observed, is that when such a sistren presents herself and shares herself in that type of way, I'm trying to think of a nicer way of saying this. This sounds very crass, but it's like this. She is his. She makes herself his. That sounds very possessive. That sounds very subjugating. Like I said, I'm trying to think of another way to describe it, but this is what I mean by that. She makes herself his, and it's up to him how he decides to guide that relationship of he and her and he, she and he. If he guides that towards him being the teacher-student type of situation, whether he guides it towards being husband and wife type of situation, where he guides that towards being pimp and prostitute type of situation, where he guides it to being father-daughter type of situation, however he guides that, she is his at that moment. Now, if he guides that relationship in a way that is disagreeable for her, unhealthy for her, and otherwise, she has the proclivity of removing herself from that circumstance. And that's the consequence. He didn't do it right, or he didn't do it enough. But at that moment, it's his decision to make, not to ask or otherwise. It has to be consensual, yes. But it's not a matter of filling a survey and like her picking a menu and having it her way. He has to guide in a way that is agreeable and supportive and healthy for her. But it's that experience of she's here. It's his ticket to ride. It's up to him. It's his ticket, but it's not a carte blanche. How about that? Does that make sense? Because, like I said, she responds. If we start to guide the ship in a way that's not right, there it is. Anyways, I gotta be careful because we're getting into the zone of storage at this point, and I have yet to share the second part of the story. So, all right, we're gonna work on the giddy up here. Giddy up culture. That's a Song of Yosef reference right there. All right. So here's the second part of the story. It's the same story, but no, I started talking about it. So I talked to you about the young brethren. So now I basically said that part of it. So like I said, that's the second part of it. There it is. Now, that being said, when I look back at it, particularly after some time, like I said, that's years ago, but even just recently, when I think about it, it's still like, yo, what was going on with that? And there have been so many surreal things. Sister approached me, and I don't mean to sound egotistical, because look at me, ooh, I'm so fancy. But there's a vibe, and there are numerous occasions. It's not everyday thing, whatever. But it happens enough, particularly for a dude who spends most of his time right here, doing this and studying. It happens enough so that it's notable, and beyond that, it's like, okay, now I'm back here doing all this, and now I have to think about what it just experienced, and it's pain, and it's not even just a matter of unrequited love, it's unrequited relationship, and that mutual yearning that is unfulfilled or otherwise, and the experience of like disappointment and letdown when one already leaps into that prospect of relationship. That's painful. So, that being said, when I think about the interaction with the sister in those years ago, I think to myself, what was going on at that beginning? Like, some people, particularly through the years, and particularly within recent years, have an idea about what I do, where I'm at, and hollering at me, and even number of kinfolk running game, and additionally having an idea of what I do, and don't say it outright, but it's like it's evident. Some people do say like recognize you and this and the other, but on that particular occasion, there is some kind of like wait a minute, there's something going on here. And I think about whether the brethren and the sister, actually know each other, whether the brethren and the sister actually have some kind of relationship or interaction with each other, whether actually the brethren that I talk to, the young brethren that I talk to, is actually talking about the sister who approached, whether she's the one who betrayed the young brethren. That's something that occurs to me a number of years ago, and whether he was doing like a smooth kind of like, that's the conversation, and once she arrives, she already knows what he's communicating, and he bounces and lets that speak for itself, and that's the conversation that he was telling me about having, like that last wrap up conversation. There it is, just had it when she just arrived, and now he leaves. Now that sounds like way presumptuous. That sounds like out of thin air, but at the same time, yo, that's what kinfolk are on. And that could be perceived as like a flex move. It could be considered like, I don't want to necessarily cold-blooded, but a very calculated move. Like, how would he know this, that, and the other? But at the same time, understand this is the levels that people are on at a young age. High school, the mind game is on tilt too, and that's not shade. That's not shade or derogatory. I'm just saying that sophisticated strategic maneuvering, and additionally, it's not just for Machiavelli elders. There are youth who are on that level. There are youth who have greater sistren and brethren who have greater relationship experience than 50-year-old married people. So don't sleep at 1:30 in the morning with all these sirens and fire engines running. Um, oh yeah, the storage too. Blah blah blah. What are we not gonna do this for nothing? Yeah, come on. All right, we're at 6. Getting low, yo. At 5, we that's what we want to call it. So all right. But anyways, I thought about that. I considered that, like whether that he was actually talking about her. Now that's one level of next level, and I say that as next level, but at the same time, they can feel like, hey, that's so pedestrian. Um, like I was doing that in 8th grade, kind of situation. Um, and it's not something to be boastful or bragful about, but um, anyways, just understanding their levels and what I'm describing as next level for some, it ain't no thing. Now, for some, it's just like, who does that? Um, they're all different types. That being said, that's not the further extent of the consideration and scenarios that is considered concerning the situation. Not only is it a matter of like this young sister, um, actually being the ex-girlfriend or whatever that the young brethren was talking about, meeting up with that day after the betrayal, and additionally, consideration. And this only recently occurs to myself personally because, well, whatever, for whatever reason. But is this that the betrayal that he is referring to is actually a betrayal of her having an affinity for me? Is that ego? Is that like way too much delusions of grandeur and self? But the consideration, though, in this scenario is that, however, in whatever way that betrayal may have been, him knowing her having some kind of affinity for myself, and because of that, discontinuing the relationship and doing it in a way whereby he has the propensity of sitting with me, talking with me, telling me about what's going to happen without actually revealing it. And then she arrives, she is like surprised, but at the same time, whatever, doesn't want to reveal too much, and trying to figure out what's happening. He doesn't say anything, and I take the onus of providing the introductions, and he recognizing that as his opportunity to complete his intentions for that moment, and continues on, and that's it. He doesn't have to say anything to her in that scenario. Let me tell it. That's very presumptuous, but it's not implausible. So, meanwhile, I'm comparatively oblivious. At that moment, I'm doing my job of attending to people, and additionally, and so she, on one hand, sees him and already recognizes, because of what's already previously communicated, that where his mindset and his intentionalities are. And so she recognizes it, but at the same time, this is where there might be substance in that notion of having some preset affinity towards myself. She sits down and talks with me for the next 2-3 hours in an energized way, in a genuine way. Now, it may be, to be honest, there may be that resignation of just talking with me being the consolation. And that's something that I do consider at that time, because it's that scenario where, like, two friends are talking to each other, and then there's the other sister and whatever, and the sister have an interest in the one friend. The one friend doesn't have his interest in them. So when the sister communicate, approach, and additionally, like, the other friend leaves, and so then it's just the second friend there, and the sister are kind of like just like humoring the second friend, but don't have an interest in the second friend because, it wasn't about that dude. So I've been in that situation, I think, maybe. I've been in the situation on both, being that friend and not the friend, and then being the friend, not the friend, and the friend still. It's complicated life. Anyways, that's what it kind of felt like when the sister in the row approached, because, like, the brethren right there, he's young, he's of a demographic that is comparatively in demand within society, and so it's very natural for her to have some affinity, and so perhaps, and in the consideration of like pausing, to because of her interest in the young brethren. The young brethren doesn't say anything. I have the onus of hospitality, so I take the initiative of initiating conversation. And then so she's responding to me. Consolation, the initial affinity. Anyway, thinking too much of things. Like I said, the point basically is already articulated. Our, being candid about intentionality, inviting consideration without requiring immediate commitment, and then discussing a methodology of ongoing communication accordingly. It sounds very calculated, but again, naturally, comfortably, consensually. There's that. There's a third joint, second joint, whatever this is at the moment. I'm doing a lot of rubbing of the nose at the moment. I said I might share another story, but if there's anything else before that. All right. Okay. This is an involved story. I probably have enough time to share it in basic, genuine form without being too abbreviated. So, all right. There's an element of this that gets a little bit, again, susceptible to accusations of delusions of grandeur. However, that's actually not the point of this story. Maybe me sharing it is a little bit indulgent. I'm going to share it anyway. This is what the zone. This is what we get at 1:38 a.m. 1h30 et 8 minutes a la madrugada. A la madrugada. Espanol. Speaking English, by the way. Remember, this is expensive. It's the sterling. All right. So, perhaps a false alarm. Nothing serious. All right. This story. I'm trying to think of the basics of elements to include in this joint. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna share the different elements because again, this is what we get. This is what we get. I said daylight. Daylight is the time for these joints. Otherwise, you get a further primal man at night. So this is what it is. A number of years ago, again, I'm in a scenario. I'm at a family-friendly festival. Essentially looking for a wife. I'm there dolo. And I didn't have a sign on myself at that moment. This is a number of years ago. And I'm sitting actually probably on like a curb of the sidewalk or whatever. The streets are closed off. Families are going up and down the streets. There are vendors and food and stuff like that. So it's a family-friendly scene. Daylight, afternoon. So as I'm sitting there, to be honest, this is when I observe in this situation and in other situations after this and amidst this that it is a very sacred space. It's a very sacred experience in terms of families interacting, families just like being present and like sharing company with each other, being amongst other families, even without necessarily knowing all the other families. There are hundreds of people at this joint. Easy, probably over 1,000. But just being in that vibe, that family-friendly vibe. It's not the fashion show. It's not, well, actually lightweight it is, but the family version, family style fashion show. It's not that stunt. It's not that stunt type of situation, like at the mall or at the hangout spot or otherwise. It's a family-friendly joint. There are young sister in there, very attractive young sister, but at the same time, everybody is in a family type of mindset. So the young sisters who are there, like, it's a matter of people's intentions and emphasis and value is for family. So even then, it's like in approaching sister, there's like an intentionality of family and honorable, because yo, parents are right here, or the parents are watching. So there's further accountability, there's further safety, and additionally, um, so that's the environment, and it's a beautiful thing to experience. Hallelujah. And as I'm there, I observe that many sisters are there searching for husband. Sisters don't have a sign on them either, necessarily, but we can see, we can cue, we can see the cues, meaning the signs without actual saying. Again, sister and just being. I mean, couples are coupled up. Like families are families, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, children. So there's that. Then there are the couples who are together and experiencing a beautiful day together. So that when sister are there, single, it's 2, 3 sisters by themselves. Yo, that's advertisement for openness to relationship, one way or another. You can say, boyfriend at home, this and the other. Boyfriends and girlfriends are playthings. When one is in that family environment without one's spousal interest, spousal partner, husband, wife, that's a communication of availability. Plain and simple facts. It's a mating ritual. So there's that. Then there's the element of young sister with being with their family. Awesome. With their fars, with their fathers and mothers. Young sister, 17, 18, 19, 20, and further. And at the same time, also, advertisement for marriage. This young sister is in a stage of life preparing for marriage. Is that presumptuous? Yo, it's presumptuous not to think that. So that's the vibes, that's the communication, nonverbal, just by walking, particularly by walking. Just so happen to walk right in front so that brethren can see. Oh, now that's a wee bit seen. Okay? Or walking back and then walking forth. Oh, okay. Does the brethren have the honor to say, excuse me, sir, I notice you're here with your family, and I see you here with your young daughter here. She's beautiful. What are your expectations for marriage for her? What are your requirements for marriage for her? Da 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 da. Women speak in very powerful and very quiet ways. Young sistren speak in even further quiet and further powerful ways. Just saying. So anyways, that's what is experienced at that festival at that moment. Now, all that being said, that's not even the story. That's the scene. At that spot in the afternoon, I'm sitting there on the curb. Kicked to the curb. And there is a young sister, maybe 16 years old, 17 years old. Am I young looking? Am I young acting? Am I looking for young acting? I'm communicating experience. So these are some of the experiences I'm communicating. She's there with her family. And it seems like an extended family. And it so happens that her family solicit her, or she solicits, one way or the other, but she posts up right next to where I'm sitting. I say hi to everybody. Hi, okay. And so her family like post up right by where I'm sitting, to the side of myself, and um, I'm not trying to eye goggle. She seems attractive. She is attractive. I'm not trying to like I said, eyeball or whatever else. But okay, and I feel energy. I feel vibes. It's not presumptuous. It's animalistic primalness. So I'm just speaking to that. Um, so anyway, she at that point her family posts up there. Then her family leave, and it's only her by herself there with a stroller and a toddler in the stroller. So I'm uncertain like what the situation is. Is she married already? Because again, sister can look 16 and be 25, and already married with her family situation or whatever else. I'm not looking at the details of what's going on, but I just see at one point it's the one sister in there with a toddler, in a stroller, and the rest of the family continues on to another location in the festival, and she's standing there, waiting, or just standing there. And at that time, what the vibe that is like, she seems a little bit too young for that to be her child, um, and so it might be a cousin, it might be a younger brother or something like that. So she's like looking out for that child. So um, again, there are a number of nonverbal communications. Without being too presumptuous, I abstained from making an overture, a direct overture, or a direct address or otherwise. Uh, that's what the situation is at that moment. Um, and at some point, she might have like taken a few steps away or otherwise, but basically the toddler in the stroller is right there, and it's like only the toddler and myself. Like the toddler might be like 3 feet away from me, a yard away, a meter away from me, and the stroller is like facing directly towards me. I'm facing in this direction, and the stroller is to my side, along the sidewalk. So I'm just kind of vibing out. I'm not trying to like be in everybody's business because people stop nearby all periodically and everything. So I'm not trying to be in like it's not a territorial thing. So I'm just vibing out whatever. Trying not to like eye goggle or otherwise, but just vibing. Now at some point, there's a sneeze that comes from the stroller. So I think to myself, I usually say bless you. In certain religious protocols, it's not said. In certain other religious protocols, it is said. I should say, we figure that amidst all conditions, it's difficult to admonish blessings. So I offer bless you. I might even say God bless you. And so again, I had to hesitate for a millisecond because I'm like, it came directly from the stroller. And so I'm like, do I say this to a baby? Do I say this to a toddler who's like comparatively unattended or whatever? Like speak directly to a child? Because that's generally against the protocols. When there's a child in public, generally speak to the parent before presuming to speak to the child directly. But in that particular instance, the child is right there a meter away from me, facing me. I'm in the other direction. A sneeze, God bless you. And I kind of look directly for a moment in that direction without, again, eyeballing or whatever. God bless you. And then continue to look this way. And the immediate response I receive is, thank you. And I think to myself initially, oh, that's a nice response. Very confident and immediate and polite. That's very impressive for such a young person. And then I think to myself, wait, hold up. That's supposed to be like a 2-year-old in that stroller. And that sounded like, at the very least, like a 9-year-old. Confidence. Thank you. And so I kind of like, I'm not trying to eyeball and be like, wait, hold up. What? Yet, like, I could see enough to see like, oh, wait a minute. That's a young brethren who might be like maybe 6, 7 years old. But again, like, I'm not trying to do all the mathematics. I don't know what that was, but, and again, thank you. Just like peaceful, confident. How am I going to hate on that? And no ritual or whatever else. But it was just like, hmm, that's unusual. And then just keep on going with the day. That's the story. Um, that's the basic gist. We gonna wrap this up because we're approaching 5. We're actually at 5 now. So without risking it further than what it already is, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, and blessed love and peace in Rastafari.